Well, thank you for that that introduction. And they say never follow a banjo act, right? And they never had quite the video introduction that got this morning with seeing what you guys have been doing for the last couple of days. Looks like a lot of fun. Looks like you guys have been having a great time. Let me just make sure my clicker works here. Yes, great. Okay. So what I want to do is just talk to you a little bit over the next maybe 20 minutes, and then I'll make sure we have plenty of time for question and answer. But as I go through the presentation, if you have a question, please ask it. I'd like to have as much of a dialogue as we can here, because it's as much of what you want to know as what I have to present. But I want to give you a sense of what happens when the NTSB comes to town. If we're going to have there's a major accident and it's something that we're going to investigate, of course we're going to focus on highway here. I want to give you a sense of what that looks like, what kind of things we're going to be talking about, what the investigation looks like, how we do the investigation, and how you can best keep track of that whole process. Kind of lay out a map of what's going to go on. But first a little bit just about our mission. Really it's three parts. We investigate. We do quite a few of these a year, about 1,600 total investigations. Most of them are small planes. And we do significant accidents in other modes of transportation. Of course, highway was what we're going to focus on here. Highway, there's about 10 million accidents a year. We do maybe 10 or 12. We do about a dozen. So literally about 1 in a million highway accidents is what we're going to investigate. But here's aviation. We did the last major accident, commercial airline accident, was Colgan Air in February of 2009, coming up on 3.5 years. This is the Grace Summit, Missouri accident. Does anybody recall what major safety recommendation came out of that one? I would say rather one of the most prominent recommendations that we've made in quite a long time. Hands, anyone? Cell phones, right? We actually made the recommendation. We've been building up to that for a while. There was a teenager involved with his cell phone, texting on the cell phone just prior to this accident. That there was 2 fatalities. And out of this investigation, and we've been dealing with distraction for a long time, we made the recommendation that all states in the District of Columbia should prohibit the use of personal electronic devices. We made that fairly broad because who knows what devices haven't been invented yet that people will be interacting with the exception of those things that aid in the driving, such as GPS. But that was a very, very significant investigation, got an enormous amount of press coverage. Here, of course, is a marine accident in Kentucky, but you'll notice there's a highway too. It's multimodal. So here was, this is in January, a ship hit the bridge span and actually dropped about 300 feet of that span into the river. Fortunately, there was no fatalities or injuries. That one's still under investigation. This one also still under investigation, Columbus, Ohio. There was a freight train derailment, a lot of hazardous materials. Fortunately, no one was hurt. This one, unfortunately, there was 8 fatalities. This is San Bruno, California, a pipeline rupture and explosion just over 2 years ago. A question we often get is, NTSB, I thought you guys were planes and trains and stuff. What are you doing with pipelines? But pipelines are a mode of transportation. Pipelines are transporting petroleum products, natural gas, hazardous materials, and they're actually regulated under the Department of Transportation. So we investigate all those different modes, and then the other 2 parts of our mission are to recommend and to advocate. We're not a regulatory authority. We're not a regulator. So what we do at the end of our investigation is we come up with recommendations that we believe can improve the safety of the transportation system. And we advocate then to get those adopted. And our record is pretty good. It's right now is about 82% of all the recommendations we have ever made have been either adopted or are in what we call an open acceptable status. Because sometimes these recommendations can take years to be implemented. They have to go through a regulatory process. We're often making these to the regulators, and that can take years to do. So we do. We've done about 13,000, more than 13,000 recommendations since we came into existence in 1967. Pardon me. Just a little bit about the agency, the structure of the agency. We report directly to Congress. The second bullet point, probably the most important, is that we are entirely independent. We were formed initially under the Department of Transportation But so we were there for about 5 years. It quickly became apparent that in our reports, when we were making sometimes harsh criticisms of the DOT modal agencies, there was a conflict there. There was budget issues, there were personnel issues. So Congress took us apart and made us completely independent. We report directly to Congress. We're tiny. We're about 400 employees throughout the United States, about 2/3 of them in Washington, and we have 10 regional offices throughout the United States, and then we have some folks that are telework in a number of other states, so we have a wide reach. And here's the current board. It's a 5-member board. They are all appointed by the President. In the center there is our current chairman, Chairman Deborah Hersman. And they each serve a 5-year term, so we get one new board member every year. Now they can be renominated, but that's the board that runs the show. And the board member role on an accident is they are the face, if you will, of the NTSB. They're the on-camera person. As many of you know, communicators, we're kind of the behind-the-scenes person. We're back there kind of coordinating things and arranging things and setting up briefings. And that's my role. I work with the board member to prepare them then for the press briefings when we break the news about what we're finding in an investigation. So they serve as a spokesperson, but their role in that as spokesperson, that ends. Their special role as spokesperson for that investigation, it ends when they leave the scene. So after they leave the scene, say it's Chairman Hersman, she's been doing briefings and briefings and briefings about an accident. Once she leaves the scene, then all of those press inquiries come to the Office of Public Affairs, and then the Public Affairs officer, whoever was on scene, will then deal with that accident throughout as long as they're there actually, because there'll be maybe documentaries made and there's follow-up stories. So their role leaves. And frequently, the press will say, such and such, Deborah Hersman, who is leading the investigation. We often have to clear that up. The board member does not lead the investigation. The board member is a spokesperson. We have professional staff of investigators that lead the investigation. And then they propose, our staff actually proposes a draft report, which is presented to the board, and then the board, the 5-member board that I just showed you, they will vote on that and then choose to adopt it or revise it as they choose. Now the party process. First of all, just a show of hands, I'm not going to call on anybody, I promise, but who's been involved in some way, shape, or form with an NTSB investigation? About, okay, a smattering. Okay, great. So some of you already are familiar with the party process, how the NTSB works. As I said, we're tiny, we're only about 400. So we need a lot of specialized information, a lot of technical information. And when we start an investigation, what our investigator charge does is selects those entities and individuals that can provide that kind of technical information for our investigation. In highway accidents, it's virtually always the State Department of Transportation. They're virtually always designated as parties. In fact, I can't think of a major investigation in the recent past where they haven't been. And then this information is shared between the parties. So as in the first few days of an investigation, we're gathering all sorts of information about, actually I think I have it on the next slide, about the roadway design. We're going to get that from the state DOT. We're going to get traffic count information. We're going to get accident statistics. That's some of the information that's going to be coming from the DOT. We're going to get that. We're going to be sharing that with other parties, and the information from other parties about the motor carrier, about the operation, about the signage. That's going to be shared, so everybody has access to the same kind of information. Now, each party has what's called a party coordinator. So if your DOT is a party to an investigation, how can you keep track on the internal side, from your perspective, on what's going on in that investigation? Find out who your party coordinator is. It's going to be one person, and you can stay in touch with them, and they can provide you some information about what's going on throughout the investigation. As I'll talk a little bit later, you can also, of course, talk to us. But if you want the more technical information about what's happening in the investigation, it's best to go directly to your party coordinator. Now, we gather all this information through the party process, and when we have all the information that we need, all the factual information, Then what we do is go into the analysis part of our investigation, and that does not include the parties. So we oftentimes get asked, hey, if you've got people involved in an investigation and they might be causal to the investigation, doesn't that potentially compromise your investigation? No, because we're getting the factual information from all the entities, but then only the NTSB are the ones that actually do the analysis and then comes to the proposed. From that, we then propose our probable cause and then our safety recommendations that are presented to the board. And here's some of the things I just mentioned that are, this is a kind of, some of the information that is frequently requested from the state DOTs, so this is the kind of thing we may be asking about if you're involved in an investigation. And the way we do investigations is a little bit different from some other entities. We're not interested in assigning blame. We're not interested in prosecutions. A lot of times, there's always going to be other investigations going on, sometimes numerous investigations. But in the highway, there will be parallel investigations, usually with the state police or the highway patrol. They may have some other things they're working on. They might not just be concerned about the safety issues, they're also going to be concerned about potential prosecutorial issues. That can get a little complicated. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But how we approach it is we start with everything on the table. So our process is really eliminating every possible cause. Because if we don't do that, at the end of the investigation, someone could say, hey, what about the gearbox? Did you check on the gearbox? In fact, we had an investigation in which there was a van that overturned, and the steering gearbox had been replaced 2 times. It had been replaced twice. So it looked like there was an issue. When we dug deeper into it, we found that they thought it had been replaced. It had actually been, when sent to the repair facility billed them, and they never actually changed the part. The original part was still in the van, so we turned that over to the Justice Department, and they did what they were going to do with it. But we have to go down every area and look at all of them to make sure we have eliminated all possible causes. So here are some of the areas we're going to look at: the driver, the roadway, the vehicle, the motor carrier. If it's a motor coach operator or a trucking operation, that can be a very major part of the investigation. Sometimes weather's an issue, sometimes it's not. We can cross that off pretty quickly. Sometimes lighting conditions, you know, where was it a dark night, where was the moon, was the sun, someone's eyes, etc. And then of course survival factors. That includes actually the emergency response. So how did the emergency responders get there? How did they how were the 911 calls handled? We'll look at all of those issues. Now just a quick snapshot of the timeline of our investigation. They're not short. They're 12 to 18 months on average. Very rarely do we have one coming in less than 12 months, and most of them, the vast majority, come in under 18 months. But there's the on-scene from the left here. We have the on-scene part of the investigation where we organize it. It's only that on-scene part's going to last maybe 10 days, 5 to 10 days. Then we can continue to develop the factual information, and we'll actually issue a preliminary report. Preliminary report's not going to have a lot of information in it, just the factual information we've developed to that point. And then we may choose to have a fact-finding public hearing. I would say in most highway accidents, we do not do that because it's a tremendous effort and resources, and so it slows down the investigation. In fact, the Minnesota highway bridge collapse, there was a little bit of controversy about that because the board determined that it was more important for them to speed through and get to that final investigation, get to that final report so we could issue our safety recommendations than to slow the investigation down several months. So sometimes there's a lot of internal discussion about the weight of that. But we can still get all the information we need through depositions, through interviews, through getting documentation from the parties. But if there is a public hearing, that's going to be a pretty major media event where we open the docket, the accident docket, which are all the factual reports. And then finally, it's the board meeting and the final report. So as I said earlier, the staff presents a draft. Sometimes this is several hundred-page report to the board. The board will have a couple of weeks to look that over, and then they'll deliberate it over the meeting where the investigators will present their findings, and then the staff will discuss it. And there's actually a picture of a recent board meeting that we have. Now, what does it look like when, if the NTSB, once we come to your town, your area to do an investigation? Well, we have what we call a go team. The investigators, the public affairs, the board members, they're all on a on-call rotation, so about a week a month. So when the bell rings, everybody's phones go off, and we try to get to the airport within a couple of hours, and depending on where the accident is, that could be a while till we get to the location. Could be 18 hours. If an accident happens in the afternoon in California, we may not leave until the morning. We may leave early in the morning, but by the time we actually get on scene, it might be 12 or 18 hours. But we try to get there as soon as possible. But virtually always, the initial evidence, if you will, that's been moved. The overturned truck, the bus, because what's the number one priority? The number one priority is getting that roadway open again. We understand that. And so we have to deal with that. We get a lot of photographs from the police, and then we'll go do a very detailed examination of the roadway, and we might need to close that down for an hour or two. We try to keep that very minimal. Oftentimes we'll do that in the early morning hours. We work closely with the authorities to minimize those traffic disruptions. Because we know the importance of keeping everything moving. So we do try to keep that to a minimum. We'll be on scene approximately 5 to 10 days. We can always find outliers for that. I think the Minnesota bridge collapse, we were on scene for about a month. It's extremely unusual, but that was an extremely unusual accident. And then we'll do media briefings for between 3 and 5 days. After about 5 days, we usually run out of things to talk about because we've collected a lot of initial information, and we can't really go into any analysis. We don't get into any of that until actually the board meeting. It's all just the facts, if you will. And then we'll return to Washington, and then the subsequent updates, and we might do a fair amount. I think in the Minnesota bridge collapse we had about 8 or 10 press release updates about the progress of the investigation. We'll do those out of Washington, and they will come out at a fairly regular basis. The bigger the accident, the more likely we're going to have those updates. Just a snapshot of a couple of some investigations we've been involved with recently. All of those investigations have been completed, with the exception of Miriam, Nevada. That was a grade crossing accident. So Amtrak train is heading to California, and a truck does not stop at a grade crossing and runs into the side of the train. Did not derail it, but 5 people were killed in that, and that's set for October 30th. Let's talk about media relations. Many of you communications professionals. As you can see, do I have a laser pointer here? But yeah, maybe right in the middle there. Where did he go? Somewhere there he is. There's Mark Rosenkerr. There's our chairman at the time, giving a press briefing. I think that was the first press briefing at the Minnesota bridge collapse. That was really kind of a zoo, as it looks like there. And we were on scene there for I think about 5 days doing briefings. So, if your organization is involved in an NTSB investigation, what are some things that you can do to keep track of what's going on and to find out in real time? It's one thing for me to come talk to you about the process, but if you're actually involved in an investigation that's ongoing, how can you best stay connected with that? The objective really is to share information. What I've been talking about with the party process works the same between communicators. Reach out to NTSB Public Affairs. We would all reach out to you, but we have numerous organizations involved in an accident investigation, and we also don't know who the point person is. So a lot of times we're involved with things with airlines. Well, we know that Delta Airlines has a huge communications department. We're not sure which communicator is going to be assigned to this particular accident. So what we would do is ask that you reach out to us in public affairs. I have the contact information on my last slide here. And just open a channel of communication and say, hey, we're involved with this. We want to just make sure that we're keeping in touch with you so you can tell us what's going on, and then maybe we have some questions for you. You might get questions from the press. What can you answer? What should you defer to the NTSB? Because your party coordinator is going to be more versed in the technical side of things, and you all are more focused on the communication side. And we're talking a little bit of a different language there, and there's different timelines for each of these events. So we encourage you, reach out to us, call us. Someone will be able to help you and put you in touch with the person on the ground in your state. Now, what to expect from the NTSB as far as information flow? What are we going to be talking about? How are we going to be doing this? What we're going to be doing on-scene media briefings. We usually do about one of these a day, sometimes two, if there's a lot of things going on. And we'll often do that at 5 p.m. local time. Can anybody tell me why that might be a good idea, 5 p.m.? Live news, exactly. Because we do a press briefing at 8 at night or something. They'll give us maybe 30 seconds or a minute. And live news, boy, if it's a slow day, we can have 5, 7, 8 minutes of just live coverage going, speaking directly through the news media to the local population. So that's worked out for us really well. We try to go right at about 5:02, give them a little bit of a break to lead into it. And then there's also photo opportunities. Of course, a lot of times, most of the photography is going to be done within the first hour or so of the accident, the emergency responders. But if we're going back to do measurements or perhaps examine the vehicle and there's a lot of interest, we may arrange for the press to do that, to see our investigators at work. It really depends upon the circumstances. Then we're going to be doing one-on-one television interviews, again, driven by the interest. So if you see one of our board member who's on scene giving a one-on-one press interview, he or she is not going to be giving any new information. It's just going to be information that's already been released in the media briefings. That's the only time we're going to actually be breaking news and releasing new news in the media briefings. And then social media, we use Twitter and YouTube. Those are the two components of social media that we currently have. We want to develop more, and we're in the process of that. But why is YouTube so important? YouTube has changed the way we disseminate news. Because in the old days, pre-YouTube, we would have a media briefing and we might have 10 or 15 or 20 people in the room. Cameras, print reporters, wire reporters, radio, and then you get that filtered, right? So you get little pieces of that, you get a little soundbite, you get their summary. If you want to keep track of what's going on in an investigation, it's best if you see the entire briefing so you can understand all of the information that maybe they didn't think was important or relevant. What's important to a general audience, what's not important to a general audience may be more important to your organization. So we now have a videographer that goes with us to every accident launch and records these briefings along with the news media, and then we upload it to our YouTube channel. And the YouTube channel is right here, so you can access everything right down there. And then here's our Twitter feed. So we're going to talk about when we launch to an accident, when we're launching, how many people we're sending, when we're landing, when our first briefing is. We might supply some little nuggets of information via Twitter about the findings that we're having. When we're doing our briefing, we're going to be tweeting those facts that we release. We'll be putting them out right on Twitter in real time if we have the staff to do it. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't, but that's our goal. So we will use Twitter extensively. So you might want to check in during an accident investigation on those two social media channels. Will help you keep track of what we're doing, what our activities are. What's the information we're going to be releasing? It's just the facts, ma'am, as Joe Friday said. It's factual information, and the definition of that is listed here. It's information, ideally, that does not change. We might refine measurements. We might have, we might have estimated the speed based on information we had from witnesses or from an engine control module, and then we're going to, as we get deeper into the lab and are able to work out some of that stuff, we may need to revise that a little bit. We often give this, we always give this disclaimer that the information is preliminary, there's no analysis included in it, and the one thing we never do is we never speculate. There's this built-in tension between the news media and the NTSB, and the news media want to do analysis, right? I mean, that's, you pick up the newspaper or watch a show, you don't want to have just the factual information. You also want to have a context to understand what that means or what that could possibly mean. So they're always trying to get us to do that analysis, and we always push back. We just don't get into that. we save that for the final report. And lastly, the communications challenges. We frequently, I would say the most challenging investigations that we do from a communication standpoint are highway accident investigations. And that's because of the simultaneous investigations going on. So you have the state police or the highway patrol or other entities doing an investigation. There might, if there's a hazardous materials release, there might be the environmental group in your state being involved in the investigation. We might have numerous sources of information coming out. When it's in aviation, it's easy for us because as a federal mandate, we are the only entity that does the aviation investigation, and we are the only entity that releases information. Not so in highway. We ask the parties that we release our accident-related information, but we may have accident-related information, and the State Patrol may have accident-related information, and they may be releasing information about their investigation, and it may overlap with our investigation, so it sometimes can get a little bit confusing. And if there's a criminal prosecution going on, as there was with the, does anybody remember the Bronx bus accident about a year and a half ago, right, where the bus was coming back from a casino run, 3:34 in the morning, driver loses control, bus tips over, goes right into a signpost, really splits the bus almost in half, and the bus driver survived. We determined there was a lot of indication that there was swerving. There were witnesses that he swerved prior to this, like there was a lot of fatigue going on. We determined there was a fatigued driver caused the accident. Well, they're just starting his trial right now. They're prosecuting him right now. So we had to work very closely with the Attorney General up there in New York to ensure that we did not release any information that compromised their investigation. So that's always something that we're working on. And I would say about a half to a third of the highway investigations, there's that component going on. So sometimes that can slow the development or the release of information, particularly after the on-scene operation is concluded. So vetting and coordinating that is often a big challenge. I wanted to leave a lot of time. That's all I have for the prepared remarks. There is our contact information. So numbers that are really helpful for you to have. Our main number is 6,000. Our public affairs number is 6,100. Now, if you call after hours, there will be a message on the number on that line, and will indicate who the duty officer is, because there's a duty officer 365 days a year. It's going to be a different way. It changes weekly. And there'll be information on how to get a hold of that duty officer, usually an email, because we all have BlackBerries, plus a phone number. And if you can't get a hold, if you really need to get a hold of someone and it's New Year's Eve or whatever, you can dial this 24-hour communications center number. It's not a public number, so we ask that you use it with discretion and don't share it widely. But if you need to get a hold of somebody from the NTSB, that is the number. You can reach that. And if you have questions, further questions for me, or you just want to follow up with something, feel free to contact me via email or phone. So that's all I have for the prepared remarks, but I'll be happy to take your questions.
Questions?
Did NTSB have any kind of role in looking into the attacks on 9/11, or did that just kind of elevate to a whole other level?
We had a role, a primary role, for about 30 minutes, and when the second plane hit, our role was turned into a support role. That's a very good question. So we were deeply involved, actually, in a supporting role with all four of the 9/11 attacks. But FBI, it's a very good question. When actually any major aviation accident, the FBI is going to respond with us, with their evidence response team, and we frequently get that question like, hey, why is the FBI here? Is there some indication of criminal activity? They're there to help us document the scene. We cross-train with them. We work very closely with them. I will say, after the TWA 800 investigation, there had been, during that investigation, a lot of tension between the FBI and the NTSB. We were on very different tracks. We were both very convinced that one thing or the other was going on, and we were able to develop, and through a lot of testing, to rule out the criminal intent issue, the theory of the bomb or the missile. But what we learned is, wow, we both have a tremendous amount of resources that we can bring to an investigation. Let's not have tension there. Let's actually build on that. So we've developed a really strong relationship with the FBI. So they're there to help us do the initial documentation if it turns out there's any kind of evidence of a criminal act. And this could be, actually, the FBI was there for the Minnesota bridge collapse too. They had a very strong presence, and they did a lot of documentation work for us. If there's any evidence, then we have a process by which we turn over an investigation to the FBI. And most recently, and I'll say this was in aviation, does anyone remember the guy who flew his plane into the IRS building in Austin, Texas? Right, yeah. So we thought, oh, wow, kind of weird, but it's, you know, looked like an accident, certainly raised a lot of questions, right? So we sent 2 investigators up from Dallas, and they got there, and then pretty soon, the guy had left a note, and it turned into very clearly a criminal act. So by the next morning, we had officially turned it over to the FBI, and we would do that with any investigation.
Yeah.
Your mission might be contrary to DOT's. So all the folks in here, you all come in. What you want to end up with might be different than what the messaging is going to help the DOT. So how do you work with them and try to have a relationship, but your mission is different. Your mission is defined with what's happened. And are you working with DOT communications folks on messaging once that information is available, or are you all out there first, surprising them? Is there a protocol or policy in place? What happens when you come there, and how can these folks and we all work with you to make sure that we're communicating, understanding your mission, but not you all getting ahead of these folks?
Well, let me see if I'll do my best to answer your question. I would say that we work with the organizations involved with any accident that we're undertaking, an investigation we're undertaking, as much as they want to. It has been surprising to me how many major investigations we've been involved with where we don't hear from the communicators on the other side. So there might be a number of parties to an investigation. Usually there's one primary. If you have a motor coach operator, in fact, I went to the New York accident, and I was trying to get a hold of the motor coach, the public affairs people, the communicators for the worldwide tours, the operator of the bus that was involved in the accident, and I couldn't. I could not reach them. It was very, very frustrating, and I was going to try to tell them, this is what we're going to be doing, this is how we're going to be handling this information, this is what you can expect. And that's why I say, reach out to us. So when you're involved in an investigation, have someone call our office in Washington, and they will put you in touch with that person on the ground. And then we can talk to you about, this is what we're going to be saying, this is what we're going to be doing. Yeah, and you're right, our mission is different. It's a safety mission. We want to find out exactly what happened so we can make recommendations to prevent it from happening in the future, or at least reducing the likelihood. We're not about the blame game. I mean, we're really not about pointing fingers and say it's his fault, it's her fault, it's their fault. We are going to say the probable cause is, or the factors are, and we are going to indicate the entities involved and the roles. That's certainly true. But we're happy to work with you and help walk you through that. Does that answer your question? Does that address essentially what you're getting at? Yeah. I'll let you pick the...
In the back.
Well, I'm glad you're here, and I'm happy to hear that. Is that a shift from their organization? Not to be rude, but we've always heard that, pretty much just you're shut down and we get nothing when the NTSB arrives. So, and I'm not going to be rude. It's just they're in charge, and they brief the media, and we go back.
And not to say, because again, I like the two that we're happy. I'm Georgia, she's Maryland. we had that horrible bus accident, and it was just an absolute nightmare, because really and truly, you're a board member, and even a reporter. I'll share this. A reporter who we knew came to us and said it really seemed like there was a personal agenda there. They were happy to have her blast us and say at the first day that she thought it was sign problems, she thought it was engineering issues for us. And we were, just trying to deal with 7 people dead. The driver had died. It was quite obvious to all of us the man had fallen asleep. This is a place that he had driven many times before. So we had to struggle with that, and then we lost a lot of ground because we had to step back. You guys had the media, they were listening to what you guys were saying because you know had most of the investigation. So I'm glad to hear what you're saying now, and I'm more than anything, I'm glad to have that we can have a contact that we can at least call and say, hey, help us with this.
Well, you know, that's why I'm here. And in fact, I was talking to one of our state legislative specialists the other day, and he said, you know, it's so important that we get out there because a lot of, and I've often felt this, like I thought, why don't people call us more? We have this Office of Public Affairs with all these public affairs specialists, and that's what we're there for. We're there for a lot of different purposes, but that's one of the key things that we do is we want to help, if your organization's involved, we want to help you through the process. It's not adversarial in any way, shape, or form. I know there can be a lot of tension at the accident scene when we're releasing information and, oh wait, does that point to us, or what are they doing? And we're releasing the factual information as we have it developed. Sometimes we find that doesn't play that important of one piece of information may not play that big of a role in the final determination, but that's something that we don't know at that early point, so we try to verify things and release them. One of the things you can do, one of the things you can talk about if you're interacting with the media is how your organization is working with the NTSB. Maybe you've had other relationships, other investigations you've been involved with. Say, hey, we've had over the last 20 years, there's been 5 separate investigations. We've worked with the NTSB throughout. We know them well. We are, you know, interested in getting to the bottom of this. So talking about the coordination of working with the NTSB is always an advantage, and just stressing to them that the NTSB is the one that's releasing the information. That's not something that we can talk about. And the report, when the report comes out, that will be the determinant of probable cause, not these individual facts that have been released thus far. Is that helpful? But yeah, I encourage you, please, to get in touch.
We have time for one more question. I think there was one at this table, number 6.
Yes, I was just curious if there's a level of incident that the NTSB will not get involved in. In other words, is there a threshold at which point there's not an investigation? Like, are you out there for every single grade crossing incident on a railroad?
No, it's a good question. We do get that question occasionally when there is a significant accident. Either why is the NTSB not involved? And there's a big accident, and you know, there was an Amtrak grade crossing accident in California. There was a couple cars that derailed. There were some injuries. There was no fatalities. So we had a meeting on that. Our highway and our rail folks got together and had a meeting. And what we do is we do sort of a triage of information. Here's the information that we have. Here's what it looks like. Now, if we do a dozen safety investigations a year, 10 or 12 safety investigations a year, we need to get the most safety bang for our buck, if you will. By looking at that, by opening up an investigation into that, do you think we're going to find anything new? It's a very inexact science because we really don't know until we get into an investigation, but we're always trying to find things that are going to yield the most results for the time that we invest. So a lot of times we'll see similar types of accidents. Okay, we've already done that kind of grade crossing. We've already done that kind of one. What else is coming up? We were looking at accidents involving turnovers of tanker trucks. Because what's happening when these trucks go around these corners, are going too fast, they have this liquid that presents some stability problems. Is that something that a stability control system could more effectively address? So we did an investigation into one of those kind of accidents recently. So a lot of times it's the issues that we're looking into. We want to focus on something, an accident will come up, and we'll decide to take it. But it's an inexact science, I should say. Okay, next one.
Thank you very much.